This is again something I'm making for my students and affiliated sanghas. As now the kind of network of my students has kind of expanded beyond Long Beach and Sozenji Temple in Montebello. So I thought it'd be important. Last time I talked about just my particular emphasis on taking refuge in sangha, which comes as a raw, real experience of encountering our own ego. Um, and this is somewhat related to it. If I ask one thing for anyone who's becoming a Buddhist to think about it carefully, if it's one thing is that taking refuge in Sangha and reflect that on the precepts that we receive. I'll talk about precepts separately. Then one thing that I've always asked my other students when they came to the community of Japanese American people was the tenets of Doji. Soto Zen Buddhism, the school of Soto Zen Buddhism has this 4 tenets in Japan. And it's described, explained in the sutra called Shishogi. That's derived from Shobogen's, of course, and it's sort of compiled in a way that's a little bit more understandable for people in 1800s. Anyway, in the fourth chapter of this sutra, they are talking about 4 tenets of practice, the way we practice. It's a bodhisattva practice. One is giving. And I have to say, I've seen people who are really good at giving. And it's something I have to work on still. I often feel ashamed. Yeah, the idea of giving manifests in many different ways. So, yeah, there are many ways of giving. I'm not going to go into much in detail. So the second one is kindness, speech of loving kindness. Talking to others as if you're talking to children of your own. So there's that. And then benefiting beings. And they say even engineering, science, anything, that would be benefiting. So those three, you can kind of sense that, okay, it's relatively understandable. Of course, and there are many different ways of embodying them. And then the fourth one is called Doji. Do means the same, identical, equal. Ji means think, matter, phenomena. Making the thing the same, being the same as. And I emphasize this, especially when you come in, step in this community of different cultures. Understand each person who's especially enthusiastic about Buddhism or Zen comes with certain agendas. This is what I want to do. I am myself, I'm like that. I was highly inspired by the Canadian value of diversity, multiculturalism. So this is something I had to struggle with within. But when we come into a different community, they have their own value agendas, things they value. And that's not always something that you value, which is the case with, I guess, in everyday life when you encounter different values, people of different values. Yes. It took me 7 years after the monastic practice, to really make up my mind that this is a path that I wanted to follow. So I made many different detours. I can't believe my teacher really allowed me to do that. I think he was technically giving up on me. I mean, he was open to the idea of me choosing a different spiritual path. I often went to Christian churches in Tokyo, my hometown, Catholic school, um, friends from theology departments. I even spent some time with the people from Jehovah's Witness. Um, well, I didn't get to see many Jewish people, but tried to sort of see different paths. Then I realized that this doji is something that really resonated in the end. After all this wavering after wavering after wavering, it's that this is something that made sense to me and made me say, yes, I want to follow this path. Ah, despite all the challenges and mistakes. Doji is something that allows us to go up to the top of the ladder, changing the light bulb of the ceiling light. Instead of wearing a robe, sitting on a cushion. Doji is something that allows us to put on an apron covered in grease, helping out the barbecue of those people in the community during the fundraising events, carrying heavy desks, tables, um, sweeping the floor. Doji is what allows us to sit next to a friend, crying out loud instead of saying, hey, let me tell you. Doji is what allows us to be open, free from our own agendas, fully open ourselves to the Dharma, the embodiment. And this can happen when you are empty of your own, this agenda. So in a sense, it's one way to look at people or students and myself, yes, if I'm kind of deluded with my own agenda. This bottomless flexibility the Soto Zen Buddhist school has is something that I truly, truly value and cherish. And when we continue on practicing this practice, this doji, I do make mistakes. You know, sometimes this doji doesn't always mean like saying yes. Sometimes this doji might mean say upfront saying heck no, because it might be more aligned with the inner voice the person has. They might want to be said no. And I tend to say yes and to the things. In many situations, I should have said no. So I'm not saying, you know, being equal to the, being the same as others doesn't always mean, say, kind of going with the flow, letting events happen. I think it requires some insight, but it also comes with this sort of a trusting mind of the Buddha nature the people have. If Christian friends come over and start preaching me about the Bible, I listen. I listen all the way, thoroughly, entirely, entirely. Then that's it. If they ever ask me about what my perspective is as Buddhist, I may say a thing or two, but that's not what they want. I think they have the wisdom, and by sharing the wisdom, they sort of come to their own conclusions. And that's not the end. That exploration will continue. But we are being there in the process. Doji is something that teaches us that we become equal to those different agendas, different beliefs, different patterns. Then let them reflect on this. I think that includes mistakes. That includes some taking detours. And then let them, with that reflection, come back to their own wisdom. To me, it has this enormous spaciousness. In a sense, that's what my teacher did for me. I was constantly dissatisfied, constantly questioning. And that was my limitation. I'm not gonna say I was there. I think I'm still there in a sense. I'll continue to be there. But his practice of doji was that he suffered with me. He dwelled in that not knowing, and he gave me a chance either to make a choice, either renounce this Soto Zen path or come back to the practice. In my case, instead of months, a few years, it took me many years. But that's what I needed. And because of that experience, I can appreciate the meaning of the first tenets of Doji. Doji is the thousand hands of Avalokiteshvara, manifesting in many different ways. It takes a form of construction worker. It takes a form of a chef in the kitchen. It takes a form of mom. It takes a form of dad, siblings. It takes a form of a baby. It takes a form beyond our imagination, without fixating our views about the shapes of the thousand hands of Avalokiteshvara. We can freely embody what we learned. And this is the, I think, wondrous elements of practicing Zen, something I truly, truly appreciate. In the midst of confusion, which will continue. Yes. So that's just one thing I wanted to kind of emphasize through this. I'm sorry, I didn't make it this. I didn't mean to make this long again. But each one, yeah, sure, can sort of contemplate, and that's just one thing I wanted to emphasize as we approach the ordination or Jukai and either one. Thank you very much.